Well, hello everyone. Hi, this is Lance Edwards, and welcome to this episode of Greenlight REI, where you learn the successful real estate lifestyle. And we are live today. What is today? Today is October the 9th, and it's 3:00 p.m. on the East Coast, East time zone. I'm broadcasting to you here from Florida, and so we're live. And unless you listen to the recording, but the benefit of being live with us today is you're going to be able to submit your questions to my expert speaker on a topic that I know everyone is interested in, because it has to do with slashing your tax bill and cutting taxes and really creating wealth and passive income in a leveraged way and not having to pay taxes along the way. Of course, the topic is about 1031 exchanges we get to in a minute. So here's the way it's going to work for everyone. When you have a question, you can submit it through the chat box. If you're listening live on the day I gave, if you're listening to the recording, to the podcast, I'm not going to be able to do this, but you can hear the answers to the questions. So at any point, either now to the end of the interview, you can submit your question through the chat box, which is up in the upper right-hand screen, again, if you are listening to us live. And our topic, I've already given you the topic. The topic is on 1031 exchanges, which I get more questions. This is one of the most popular topics. Get more questions about this. And we brought in one of the national experts, Mr. Tom Phelan, who has been doing this since teaching people, consulting with the real estate community, including realtors, since 1998. That's a long time, Tom. Since 1998. Yeah. And he's personally been involved with real estate as an investor since the 1980s, investing in fix and flips, fixer-uppers, and buy and holds, where 1031 exchange knowledge is essential to building your retirement very quickly. So whether it be single-family rental, which I know many of you are doing this or have done it, or multi-families, apartment houses, which is, of course, my sweet spot, or it's a ranch or it's an office building, 1031 exchanging is a key tool in your toolbox for tremendous tax benefits. And unfortunately, here are the facts. So many people are not very 1031 exchange savvy, including your local real estate agent. I'll let Tom speak to that. Tom's purpose in life is to change all that. So that's who we have with today, Tom Phelan. Tom, welcome to Greenlight REI.
Thank you, Lance. I appreciate being on your show and look forward to any questions we may get and ones you ask me.
Well, super, because I'm gonna feed them to you. I'm gonna play the advocate of the people that are listening, Tom.
Okay.
And I think I know what the questions are, but we're gonna pepper you with questions, and we're gonna see whatever I miss. Let them throw them at you as well. So let's get started. So question number one, Tom. Let's just start with the basics. Why do so few people, including realtors, know so little about 1031 exchanging?
One word: education. The public has never been taught about 1031 exchanging, and that it is the greatest tax tool ever given to people by Congress back in 1921. And because realtors have never been taught the power of 1031 exchanging, they look at it proactively. Lance, when's the last time one of your realtors talked to you about the power of 1031 exchanging?
Very, very few. Very few, I can tell you that.
Yep.
So so we got lack of education. We're going to hopefully cover some of that here today, Tom. So here's a follow-up question. Here's many times I hear about it. Many times people are talking about doing a 1031 exchange after they've already sold. After they've already got it under contract. So why do so many people get their timing all wrong?
Well, again, I would say education. People can't consider 1031 exchanging as a tax tool if they've never been educated about it, had it explained to them.
All right. So what I'm hearing from you then, Tom, is that 1031, if you're doing 1031 exchange, you need to be proactive rather than reactive, where the investor is thinking about doing the 1031 exchange once she has it under contract. So talk about the timing here. What do they need to do here to do it right?
Well, 1031 exchanging is not complicated. If you're aware of the rules before you have an investment property under contract. That's one of the major keys. Learn about it, whether or not you want to pursue it before your property goes under contract. If you wait until your property is under contract, and let's get this established, the property you're giving up, selling, is called the relinquished property. Okay, if you wait until you get like a settlement report and you realize, oh my gosh, I'm making a pretty good chunk of money here, I'm going to have a pretty good chunk of taxes, it's not too late. I want to emphasize that, but you've maybe used up a lot of time that you could have had to identify properties, and we'll get into that.
All right, so before we get into identifying properties, here's a question I probably should have asked up front. Let's say we have somebody on the call right now, or the live webinar or the podcast, that's brand new and they don't even know what a 1031 exchange is. Give us a layman's definition of a 1031 exchange.
Well, my favorite definition is it's a loan made by the IRS to you, the taxpayer, at 0% interest, no repayment schedule, and if under the right conditions you meet them, you never have to pay the loan back.
And it's triggered, and go through the process. Talk a little bit about the process of selling a property and the time you've got.
Okay. When you have a relinquished property, the property you're selling close, okay, title passes, you now have 180 days to find and close on a replacement property or properties. So the initial time frame is 180 days. There are restrictions within that time frame.
All right.
For example,
give me an example. Go ahead.
Okay. For example, once you close, there's two really time periods that start to run concurrently. The 180 days to close the exchange on the property that's replacing what you're getting rid of, and also the 45 days to identify replacement property rule. You have 45 days. And Lance, I'm going to emphasize the 45 days ends on midnight of the 45th day. If that's on a Saturday or a Sunday or Easter or Christmas, it's too bad. The IRS is heartless. They don't give any extensions. So those are the two key time frames, 180 days and 45 days to identify.
All right. So I've sold a property. The clock starts. I have profits from the sale of that property. Just to be clear, if you use those profits to buy another property within 180 days, then you avoid any capital gains tax, zero, correct?
Well, there's some conditions to that, but in essence, yes. Okay, and we'll get into maybe a little more of the meat of it. So, if I could, let me talk about one of the most confusing things. It's called the 3 property rule. Okay, you have to identify some properties. How many? Well, there's really no limit. However, IRS in its wisdom has said if you identify over 3, you could be in a minefield unnecessarily. So let's just talk about identifying up to 3 properties. You have 45 days to identify. And identify means convey to the intermediary and have proof that they've received it, a legal description, tax rolls, what have you, of the property you're identifying. So you just can't say a cute duplex or a nice looking fourplex, whatever. It's got to be an actual address with a legal description. That helps, okay? Now, during that 45 days, you can revoke, identify, and consequently revoke as many properties as you want. It's at the end of day 45, the window closes, you can identify no further properties. Now, let me give you a real delicate position here, a situation. A lot of people come to me and say, well, I'm buying a friend's house, or I already have a house picked out. I've been looking at it for quite a while, an apartment. I'm ready to roll on that. I only need to identify 1. Who cares? Why should I identify more than 1? What if the owner of that property drops dead and now it's in probate? It's going to go way beyond your 180 days. What happens if it's a married couple, they get in a divorce situation. I've seen all these things happen. There's a lot of things that could happen that could knock that first property out as an identified property. So it makes sense to identify a second and a third property as backups. Okay?
Got it. Okay.
I want to make sure we're straight on that. Okay. Now, the next thing people say, go ahead.
No, please go ahead, Tom.
Okay. The next thing people say is, well, what's available as a second or third property? Well, obviously, you can identify properties that suit your purpose, and I'll tell you what's defined as suiting your purpose. Okay? The property that you end up closing on within the 180 days total must be equal to or greater than in value the property you're coming out of. So, Lance, you couldn't have a fourplex that's worth $300,000 and exchange into something that's $200,000. You can do it, but you're going to have tax consequences. They call it BOOT, B-O-O-T. Okay? So you want to make sure what you identify is equal to or greater than what you're coming out of. Now, it can be the combination of the three. You could, in theory, come out of a $300,000 property and identify three $100,000 properties. That's a fine, because you're being equal to or greater than. But if one of those fell out, I think you can see the problem. Suddenly, you're not equal to or greater than, and you're also going to run into a situation of what they call boot or debt. Well, we'll get into mortgage boot also, which I might as well cover now. The same thing is true, Lance, for mortgages. A lot of people don't understand this. You have a property for $300,000 under contract. You're closing. You'd identify the property for $300,000. You're fine, equal to or greater than. But you have a $200,000 mortgage on it, and it's paid off at the closing. But the property you go into, you only take a $100,000 mortgage out. That's called debt relief. You're going to be taxed on that reduction in the mortgage as capital gains. That's why a strategy, crunching the numbers, is so important before you even go under contract. Why wouldn't it? Why wouldn't you want to know before? So at least you know what you're up against.
Let's go to that last example again. Let's do that last example again with the debt relief. So give me the numbers again on that, Tom. Yeah.
Okay. Let's just say you're coming out of a property that's $300,000, and you have a $200,000 mortgage on it. You sell, it's sold, it closes, the clock starts to run, and you've identified a property that's also $300,000 or more. So you're equal to or greater than. You've met that requirement. However, the property you go into only has a $100,000 mortgage. Maybe you've added cash. Maybe something else has happened to where you don't take a mortgage that's equal to or greater than the mortgage you did have. Any amount that's less is going to be considered a relief of debt, and it's going to be taxable as mortgage boot. So your mortgages, you want them to equal each other.
So both the property value has to be greater than, and the mortgage that you're buying has to be greater than the mortgage that you sold, or the property you sold?
Yes, equal to or greater than. The exchange won't fail. It's just that you're going to be liable for taxes on any cash taken out or any debt relief. If you owe $200 on a mortgage and go into it and you owe $100, you've been relieved of $100,000 for the debt. IRS considers that debt relief as taxable.
And would that be taxed as a capital gain?
Yes.
Okay. All right. That is interesting. So we got two conditions here. We got the value of the property equal to or greater, and the value of the mortgage equal to or greater. Correct?
Correct.
All right.
Now, it could be sell or carry. Let's say you found someone willing to carry back. That's fine. That's a mortgage. You could do an assumption. That's a mortgage, as long as it's equal to or greater than. You're not going to face tax liabilities. That's what I'm trying to emphasize. You can do it. The exchange won't fail. But you might end up paying some taxes.
Partial tax. Yeah, I got it. I got it. Partial tax. All right.
And
Now here's a question I get a lot, Tom, and I'll get back to some of these more. I'm going to cover some basics, and we'll get more to your strategy. Question I get a lot: if I'm selling, you already told us the property that you're going into has to be equal or greater value. Does it matter if you're selling a house and going into an apartment, or an apartment going into an office? Does that matter? The type of property?
No, that's the beauty of it. It could be raw land. It could be a 30-year lease. That's what's so cool about it. And that is a big a misconception last year. Absolutely right. Of people saying, well, I heard, a duplex, I got to go into another duplex. No, you don't. You could go into a single family home. You could go into a 6-unit apartment, especially if you go beyond your territory. Like a San Francisco duplex at $900,000 might be a 20-unit apartment in Oklahoma City.
Exactly. Yep. All right, so this is great. I think we've covered the basics and the foundation, and actually very informative. So let's talk a little about strategy. You started touching upon this, Tom, and I know you're not a big fan of an IRA or a 401k as a retirement vehicle, and what you suggest is a strategic series of 1031 exchanges might be a better approach. Can you explain that?
Sure. Let's assume that someone buys their first single-family home rental, and they have enough cash, they get a mortgage or whatever, they put it together, it's an investment property, they rent it. And let's use 5 years. 5 years later, it's gone up 20, 30%. They now do an exchange, and they go into a duplex. And they don't reach into their pocket for a dime. Out of the closing, the proceeds pays closing costs, commissions, everything, exchange costs, everything. So they don't have to reach into their pocket, and they don't have to pay any capital gains tax or recapture tax on depreciation, which lands is 25% and get pretty steep. Okay, so now they have that duplex. 5 years later, it could be sooner, it could be a little longer, depending on economic conditions. They go ahead and sell the duplex in exchange into a fourplex. No money, don't have to reach into their pocket, don't have to pay any capital gains or recapture taxes. And then we're now 15 years later, that fourplex to go into an 8-unit. At year 25, they go from an 8-unit into a 12-unit. So there they are, 50, 55, 60 years old, with this apartment house with a mortgage that's practically paid down to nothing. They haven't come up with one dime for any capital gains taxes or recapture depreciation, okay? And they're not worried about tax rates at that time. That, to me, is one of the fallacies of the 401k or the IRA, unless it's Roth, is you're banking, Uncle Sam's going to want less 20, 30 years from now than he does now. I think you'd agree with me, Lance. That's kind of, I don't know, a pipe dream.
Right.
Because I don't see that happen. Not being 22 trillion in debt, we won't get into that. But you know what I'm saying. So therefore, there they are sitting with this incredible piece of property. They only had to feel the pain once, and that was 20, 25 years prior when they bought that first little single family home as a rental. I just, to me, and you know the big payoff, Lance, if everything goes to heck in a handbasket, you can't move into your stock portfolio, you can't move into your IRA, but you can move into a unit, you know.
Well, I'm in, brother. I mean, you and I are on the same page with regard to this, and so, and you know, and let me just recap it, so everyone. Make sure you got this, because this is really critical. This is a strategy I teach as well. So basically, you take the money you're making from your job, for example, and instead of parking into your 401k, you park it into a small apartment building. And you hold on to it, and you operate it, you're paying it down. Well, a few years later, you sell that small apartment building, and you're going to trade up to a larger apartment building. Do the same thing over, pay it down, collect cash flow. 2 years later, you're going to sell that apartment building and get all the in 1031 exchange each step along the way, so you're not paying any capital gains tax.
you trade up to an even larger apartment building. The whole time, what you're doing is you're building your wealth, you're building your cash flow, you're paying down the mortgages on these properties. So at the end, by the time your retirement comes, you've got equity, you've got cash flow, and the tax rate on passive income is the lowest tax rate you're going to pay, and you've paid no capital gains along the way. And it is, first of all, I think that's exactly the strategy you're just proposing. Correct, Tom?
Absolutely. And the big payoff is, okay, if you meet one condition, you're the taxpayer who's done all these exchanges over the years. You meet one condition, you never pay tax. You never pay. You know what that condition is?
Yeah, go ahead and tell them. I know it. You die.
Yeah, and we all die. This is so important. Your heirs inherit on a stepped-up basis. What is the fair market value of that apartment house at the time they inherit? And all of your depreciation, it's not erode their basis. Their basis is what the fair market value is. So you can rest assured it's a legacy that they got it intact and aren't paying a dime of taxes. It doesn't get any better than that.
It's a beautiful thing. And you talk about your life insurance program. Here it is. This is what takes care of your heirs after you're gone. You got cash flow.
Absolutely.
You got equity. You're not paying any tax when you die. I mean, I challenge anyone to beat that with any other vehicle. So we're on the same page. Go ahead, Tom. Yep. Go ahead.
Well,
here's the question.
One other quick thing. Yeah.
Please. Go ahead, please.
Okay, one quick thing, because Ron LeGrand stumbled on this. He did not know this. I have mentioned the 45 days to identify 3 properties. Oh my God, what if you identify 4 or 5? No problem. It's just that it can trigger some ratios or equations that make it more complex. Okay, and one's called the 200% rule, and one's called the 95% rule. And in essence, it says if you identify 4 or more properties, okay, and those properties you've identified as an aggregate are 201% more value of what you're coming out of, you have to close on 95% of them. So that again is just doing good strategy, knowing you can't, because a lot of people out to think I can only identify 3. Lance, I've had people come out of a multi-apartment unit and go into 10 single-family homes. I've had people going from a $900,000 California duplex into a multi-unit. So just learning what you're up against, how to do it beforehand is the key.
Well, I thank you for that. I can tell you personally, I've had a client who he was coming out of a California property, was very high-priced California property that he 1031 exchanged into 10 properties that I sold him for that very fact. It's the dollars that matter, the number of properties. So I can attest to that. But then I'll go back to one thing, Tom.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead. Finish that thought. I got something I want to ask you about. Go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say, because part of what you teach, which I think is fabulous, don't always think that you got to invest in your backyard. Okay? A lot of people, I think you would agree, would be totally discouraged on a $900,000 duplex that's pulling $4,000 in rent. It's not a great deal. But they're in Macon, Georgia, or Oklahoma City, and it's a nice-looking 12-unit for $600,000. It flies. So that's why that's so important as well, that you have that versatility that you can move from one state to the next or one area to another area.
And you just gave me an idea. You've probably already done this, Tom. If you haven't done it, I would encourage you to. You should probably do a side-by-side comparison of what it would mean to take money, invest your job income, your spare savings, to an IRA over 30 years versus doing it in rental property. You should do a side-by-side. If you don't do it, I'm going to do it. I know what the answer is going to be.
Yeah. Well, I'm in the process of doing that now, but I'd love to coordinate it with you because I don't have an inventory of actual properties. You do. And when you can give a real example, even if it's long sold, but you can give a real example, absolutely. People should see that. It's breathtaking. It'll stop them in their
I'm going to tell you, it'll blow it away. There'll be no comparison. There'll be no comparison. It'll blow it away. And all right, we're going to do that. This is sidebar. We're going to do this, but we'll share it to everyone. But going back, so we're talking about, it's retirement strategies. It's one way to use 1031s, is obviously a big, powerful one, and the use of 1031 exchanges versus your IRA. So here's a question for you. I think I know the answer. Here's the question, Tom. Why do so few people do it? Why are so many people doing the IRA approach and not taking this other approach that you're advocating and I'm advocating on using rental income in 1031s? Why is that?
Okay, I'll try to make it as quickly as I can. In 1976, Gerald Ford signed into law the IRA. The IRA was welcomed by employers because it shifted the responsibility of an investment strategy for retirement to the employee. Most employees didn't have a clue what to do, and I'm not knocking them. Hard-working folks, but they didn't know. Guess who stepped in and saw that opportunity? Wall Street. What was their favorite product? Mutual funds. Lance, every month we take $200 out of your paycheck, put it in there, and this should make you really well off when you're 65. The problem is you're not often, and they never come to you and say, by the way, there are other options you might consider, such as real estate. Couple that with NAR, the National Association of Realtors, who's never really pushed to its 1,300,000 realtor members, that real estate is a great way to have a retirement. And the fact of that is that 95% of the $13 trillion in IRAs and 401ks are in Wall Street. It's propaganda, harmless. I'm not knocking Wall Street, but they've had a chance to say we're the only show in town, and no one has ever opposed them. And my goal is to now oppose them.
And mine. And mine too. And mine too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And mine too. That is my goal.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's exactly my goal too. And the simple answer is that it's just advertising. You got the Fidelities and the Vanguards, pushing all this. And I'm not knocking them. But there are other options, and it's open to everybody. That's why I'm in business. That's why Tom's in business, is educating people to these other options that are out there, and it's supported by the IRS. You just need to know about it, how to put it. And when you run the math, it's a no-brainer.
Yep.
All right. So a couple of things here, Tom. I want to make sure we've been going here on strategy. Let's get back to some nuts and bolts, because I've been moving you around here. And again, I get a lot of questions about the timing, the 45-day rule and the 180-day rule. And you were talking about midnight. Well, I want you to recap for us again. When does a 1031 exchange begin, and when does it end?
Okay. A 1031 begins upon the closing of the first relinquished property. Okay, that day. And it runs 180 days. You have to close on your replacement property or properties. Notice I said close. During that same time period, beginning with the same date when you close on your first relinquished property, you have 45 days to identify your replacement properties. After the 45th day, the window's closed. If you haven't identified anything, you have nothing to exchange. It will fail. Okay, you'll pay taxes just like as if you'd never done it.
All right, and okay, so you got the 45 days to identify, the 180 days to close. What if your tax return comes due in the middle of this 180 days or this 45 days, or you
must be psychic, because I was just going to bring that up. Good for you. So people know this, and it's deadly. Is you're beyond your 45 days, you've identified property, you got a couple of them under contract, life is good, and you and the wife do your taxes and say, hey, we're going to get a big chunk back. Let's run down to the post office and file it before your 180 days is up. The filing of your federal taxes ceases the exchange. You have no extra time. And if you haven't closed on those replacement properties, the ones you've identified, the exchange fails.
All right. So that's bad.
So what do you do?
So
if you're going to
what do you
get
do?
a big chunk back, just file an extension and wait. If you owe taxes, just file an extension and wait until your 180 days are up, or you have closed and the intermediary says it's over. But that's a very good point. Thank you for bringing that up. It's not too often, but I've seen it occur, and you go, ooh.
Well, I could see that happening. You're talking about a 6-month period. It's not too unlikely that
Sure.
Deadlines could come fall in that 6-month period.
It certainly could.
All right, and now one thing we haven't talked about yet is two things here. First, so you need to be thinking about your strategy of a 1031 before you're under contract on your current property. So talk about that. How should someone be thinking about a 1031 exchange, and when should they be thinking about it?
Well, ideally, you call me and say, hey, Tom, I got a single family home. I got a 12 unit, a 60 unit, whatever. And I go over the basis with you. What's your basis? What have you added? It's capital improvements. What have you depreciated? And where do you stand selling that property to pay taxes? Because you might say to me, I don't want anything more to do with rentals. I want to get out. It does happen. Okay? At least you know what you're facing as far as taxes. Okay? But you want to use it as a strategy in exchange to other things. We go over what those things might be, where they'll be located, and how much time you have, and do you want to identify several properties or get above 3, and what does that involve? It's all laid out before you maybe put that house up for sale, so you know exactly where you're going. Because also, when you list that property, you want to have a clause that buyer agrees seller, Lance Edwards, is conducting a 1031 exchange and will cooperate at no additional liability or money, so that you don't have a buyer suddenly squeeze you because they realize you're in exchange. It's rare, but it has happened, and try to, in a way, extort from you a better price, a lower price, whatever.
Okay, so let's talk about this. If that clause is not in your contract, does that void the exchange, or
No.
does it just protect you?
Well, yeah,
okay.
Yes and no. When I was in Colorado, I've been licensed in 5 states to sell real estate. When I was in Colorado, they actually did add that clause. So if I were someone, I would look at the contract and see if that's included. Now, that also applies, okay, to the seller of replacement property. So Lance sells a duplex. He now finds a 4-plex. He makes an offer, goes under contract. Lance, in buying that property, should say, seller is aware that buyer is conducting a 1031 exchange and will fully cooperate at no additional cost or liability. So you want it on both ends. You follow?
Got it. And by the way, I see it in a lot of state farm contracts
Okay.
these days. So, but everyone keep an eye. Should be looking for it.
Yeah, they've gotten more savvy. Absolutely. Now, if
right.
can I tell one quick story?
Please.
I had a couple come into me. They were an elderly couple, and they're so funny. They're bragging about their Denny Grand Slam for $3.99. Then we sit down and we start going over what they're doing. And they had a 2,000-acre ranch in Colorado. It was worth millions, and they were selling it. And I said, what do you want to do? What in your heart's desire do you want to do? They said, we have a daughter that's a beautician. We'd love to buy a beauty shop for her. And she could someday take it over. We have a son who graduated from law school, yada, yada. We'd like to give him an office, a small office building. Plus, with some of that money, we'd like to buy ourselves a house. We accomplished all of them, including buying that beauty salon, buying that office for the son. They had to pay fair market value rent, but they were the happiest people in the world that they had to pay no taxes on any of this. So sometimes,
well, that's beautiful.
Absolutely, yeah, isn't that amazing?
It's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Here's another one. Lance. You're talking to a neighbor and says, yeah, my daughter got into Brown University. She's going back to Rhode Island. and we got to go back, or she's going to look at an apartment to rent. God, it's pretty expensive. And you say, well, Joe, you have a single-family rental here. Once you sell it, exchange it, buy a condo back in Rhode Island and Providence, for example, and go ahead and let her live there while she's going to college. She's got to pay fair market rent. She doesn't have that. So Lance and his wife gift her the money, which is perfectly legal. And she takes that check, deposits it, and writes a rent check, perfectly legal. Once she graduates, you and your wife, because maybe you don't want a property in Rhode Island any longer, you sell it, exchange, and bring it back to where you live. Strategy.
That's perfect. And that's what you do.
Yep.
So talk about, you basically, you can help people on strategy. You're a consultant. People doing 1031 exchanges.
Exactly.
Talk about what you got. And so you're here to help people, not just educate, but to help them on the strategy. So when someone's thinking about, before they're thinking about selling, they need to be contacting you. Is that the right time, Tom?
That's exactly it. And bounce it off me. And sometimes I can't do anything for it. Sometimes I say, don't do an exchange. It doesn't make sense. Okay? But there's times I spend several hours with them going over preliminaries. For example, what's your budget? What do you have? And I'd work with you obviously on that for inventory, but there's a natural entree there of this is what you can get for X, Y, Z, what have you. For example, I may have someone come to me, they only have $20,000 as a down payment. I have a suspicion of a single family rental somewhere for that. Okay?
Right.
Even if it's that modest. Okay, a duplex, maybe they have $50,000 down, maybe they have $100,000 down. I mean, it's what do you have? What's your risk tolerance? What's your budget? And how are we systematically going to do this? Check on it, and when it's apropos, exchange and move you up. It's like you're at the gym with 10-pound barbells. Okay, once you get good at those, Lance, I'm going to give you 15s. You get good at that, I'm going to give you 20s. It's as simple as that.
That's exactly what I teach, by the way. Start small and scale up with apartments. And it's the same thing. It's just exactly great analogy. Yeah.
But why pay any tax on it? Now, a fix and flipper, as you well know, because it's not an investment property, they're more of a dealer. If they hold it for less than a year, they buy it, they wholesale it immediately, or they fix it in 30 days and get rid of it immediately. That's a whole different arena, and often the 1031 will not suffice. But I've seen a fix and flipper buy a property, be in it for 11 months to get it ready, take it to market, and sell it, and maybe make $50,000 or $100,000, but then they get killed by taxes. Ordinary income, okay? Where if they would have then rented it for 6 months or a year and now have held it for at least a year and exchanged it, they wouldn't pay any taxes.
That's a great point. Is 12 months pretty much? I don't think there's a time frame defined in the 1031 code, but is it 12 months kind of a safe bet, Tom?
You're absolutely right, Lance. There is no statute. There is no case law. There is some PLRs, private letter rulings, or TAMs, tax advice memorandums, that come down, and pretty much a year is considered minimum. I've seen less for extenuating circumstances. I've seen maybe a bit longer, but it is going to focus on intent, because let's say you bought a property and day one you put a for sale sign in it, and 13 months later you can't get rid of this dog for whatever reason, and you finally do, and you manage to make a profit, you say, I'll do a 1031 exchange. You probably wouldn't qualify if they audited you, the IRS, because your intent from the beginning was to dump it.
Yeah, I've heard this. That's a great point. That's a great point.
Yeah, right. As opposed
intent.
to, you're right. Intent is huge. It's huge. Because occasionally you'll see where they're trying to exchange in an apartment house and they're making $250,000, and they try to slip it under the radar or whatever, and that's a very, very touchy situation. Also, Lance, one other thing just came to my mind. It's very common people make a mistake. You own a property as Lance Edwards. It's a duplex. You exchange and you decide to create an LLC, Bluebell. Okay? Switching horses, changing the entities in an exchange, you can't do it.
Oh, I did not realize. I didn't think about that. So
Okay.
if I'm in an LLC, let's just call it, Edwards Properties LLC as the owner, and I sell the property, or Edwards LLC sells the property, I need to take title of a new property as Edwards LLC, correct?
Yes, unless it's a single entity LLC and it's called a disregarded, that you want to get into with a CPA. But yes, you are absolutely correct. Or you formed a corporation for some reason. Now, where this really becomes germane is you and 3 other friends, 4 of you, have a partnership, Cloverleaf partnership, and you own a 60 unit. You're getting into bigger money, okay? And as we know with partnerships, sometimes there's bad feelings, whatever, and they're saying, to heck with it, let's get rid of this guy. You've done well, it's appreciated. Well, you either have to dissolve the partnership and go into 4 individuals a year prior to exchanging, or exchange into something, hold it as a partnership for a year, and then dissolve it.
Wow. These are all the reasons somebody needs to talk to you before they go under contract.
You got it. That's kind of my point. I'm not trying to do this purposely, but it's fact. There's a lot to really know and understand.
The thing is, here's my observation, and we're going to take some questions here in a minute, guys. So, by the way, let me just put a plug in here. If you have not submitted a question, go ahead and do it now, because we're going to take some questions here in a moment if you're listening to us live. One of the great things about the IRS, they give us all these, special tax breaks that people don't know about, but you need to be doing it with someone who understands how to do it. This is not, kind of a roll your own. You get involved with Tom here on the 1031 exchanges. And speaking of which, Tom, go ahead and give it out. How do people get in contact with you, and what goodies do you have for them?
Okay, they can email me and establish contact. I'll be glad to talk to them, set up something. My email is TOM, T like Peter, HELAN like Nancy, Y like yellow, at yahoo.com.
Let me play that back, and rest assured, guys, I want to put this on the show notes when we post the recordings at greenlightreinvesting.com. But it's Tom, T-O-M, Phelan, Phelan, at yahoo.com, which is actually, Tim, how would you say that? You're not going to say felony, Tom.
Right. Yeah, I've had people say I used to be a misdemeanor, Right. Now, Lance, I'm certified. I've been certified in 5 states to teach 1031 exchanging. The reason I bring that up, I used to work directly for an intermediary. I don't anymore because I don't want to be beholden to a particular one. But the intermediary I worked for prior, which is a major one, they average 200 incoming phone calls a day about questions on the 1031. Do you know who the majority of the phone calls were from? CPAs, accountants, and lawyers. And what they would do is maybe be on the phone 5 minutes, maybe a half hour. They'd get some complex issue answered, they'd then go back and say, Lance, I got all the information for you, and by the way, here's my bill.
Right. And speaking of which, you're licensed in 5 states for doing real estate transactions, but you can consult nationally, right?
Right. I'm no longer licensed in 5 states. To make that clear, I was, yes.
Okay.
No, it's a federal law, just like the IRA 401k. It's actually a federal creature, and so yes, no matter what state you're in, okay. And occasionally you run into it's a Canadian who owns a house in Milwaukee, okay. He or she can exchange if it's into a U.S. state. Can't exchange to something in Canada. You cannot exchange from something in the U.S. into a foreign country except for Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands. However, Lance, this will send shivers down some people, is you can do an international exchange. If you bought a condo in Mexico, you're down in La Paz, you fell in love, paid $300,000, 10 years later, it's worth $6,000, and you sell it. Uncle Sam wants to know about that. You can do a 1031 exchange, international property for international property.
No, really? Is that right?
Yep. Yeah, I've had people do it for a lot of money and not realize they could have done it. And Uncle Sam saying, "You owe us." Those were profits.
All right. There's one more question I've got for you, Tom. Then I'm going to shut up. We're going to take some questions here from our listeners and our live viewers here. And you just mentioned a minute ago, the intermediary. So explain to everyone what an intermediary is, and once they're going to consult with you, they're going to get their best strategy, best advice. They're going to sell the property. Where does the money go, and how does an intermediary, and what is an intermediary? Explain that if you would.
Okay. An intermediary is a unbiased third-party entity that takes the money from the closing of your relinquished property and warehouses it until you close on your replacement property. Then it disperses the funds as per your request. Okay? Now, a third-party intermediary, sometimes they're owned by title companies, sometimes they're standalones. If people email me, I will give them the list of a name of an organization that most intermediaries belong to. It's kind of a self-regulation organization. An intermediary should not commingle funds with other exchangers' money. They should not commingle with its ABC intermediary and they're owned by XYZ and they give XYZ the money to invest. This happened years ago and it was tens of millions that went south. So they want to make sure and be careful of that. God love an attorney who may say, I can do your exchange, but is he insured and bonded? We had a case, the attorney was going to help close the property. At day 170, he had a relative get extremely ill. He went to their bedside. He ended up staying 2 weeks for a funeral. The 180 days had elapsed. The exchangeor taxpayer was banging on his door. His office was closed. The exchange failed. So you want to make sure you got someone who's competent, experienced, insured, and bonded. And I will make recommendations for those.
All right. So again, let me leave this out, people. So put it out there again. So to reach Tom, give his email address. Again, I want to put this on the show notes along with recording here. I know a lot of people probably want to hear this again. It'll be on the show notes at greenlightreinvesting.com. But Tom's email is Tom, T-O-M, Phelan, P-H-E-L-A-N as in Nancy, with a Y on the end. Tom Phelan, Y, at yahoo.com. And I'll put that on the show notes. All right, Tom, we got some questions coming in. You up for some questions beyond me? I've been peppering you here for a while.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, let's bring them up here. Let's see if I can get them up here. Hang on. Okay, we've got, these are long questions. All right, here's one. Jay Little. Hey, Jay. Jay asks, is there a cap on the value passed on to heirs?
No.
Talked about how it passes on. Is there a cap on the value that you can pass on?
No.
No cap. Okay. That was a beautiful thing. Here's a question from Gordon. Gordon says, you do the exchange into the LLC in the same name, but you ultimately want it in a different entity name. How best to transfer or assign the property to the new LLC, and what's the time frame involved? Does that make sense, Tom?
Yeah, well, you'd want to hold it for at least 1 year after you've acquired the replacement property. And at that time, you probably want to talk to a CPA or an intermediary. It's beyond my expertise, my tax expertise, if you wanted to go into a C Corp or something like that. Now, mind you, I'm assuming in this hypothetical that what you go into, you want to change, it's the same 100% ownership. You follow? You're not giving away half of it to your sister or your kids or whatever, because then that would be a distribution, so to speak. So it had to be 100% of that property into another entity where the same 100% was owned.
And you're talking about going from once you buy the new property, let's say you wait a year and you want to assign it from one entity to another, the new entity has to have the same ownership structure. Otherwise, that could trigger a taxable event. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah. You couldn't in that transaction. Well, I'll give half to my son. Give half to me. You get into gift tax. You get into bringing it out of that property. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
No. Yeah.
But it's a great question, Gordon, and another example of why you guys need Tom on your team. Let's see. Another question from Gordon. I think we answered this early on, but I'm going to put it out here because this is a question I get a lot. Can it be one building to multiple buildings with the same overall value? I think the answer to that was yes, right?
Absolutely. As long as it's equal to or greater than.
All right. Yeah, I think that's a very popular question. Here's a question from Jay. How much is the 1031 exchange fee? Talking, I guess, about the intermediaries here, Tom.
Right. Okay. By the way, intermediary, we're also called, or I'm not, but companies are called facilitators or accommodators. Almost sounds like a hitman, but anyway, intermediary is the most popular. Typically, for coming out of one property into one property, $750 to $1,000. It's a bargain. If you come out of one property and go into 2 or 3 properties, they may charge you $100, $150 per extra property. If you get into a reverse exchange, and I didn't mention this one, and I'll just touch on it now, and believe me, it's something you need to spend time on, but now's not the time. A reverse exchange is basically where you go buy the replacement property first, the 180 days starts to run, and now you get rid of and sell your relinquished property. Okay?
Oh,
that could cost $4,000 or $5,000. Well, let me give you an example, Lance. You come across a 12 unit that you're jumping up and down on. The price is right. The location, it's a gym, and you want to buy it now. Okay? You buy it, but you set up a reverse exchange. The intermediary takes title of that 12 unit, yada, yada, yada. Now you say what I want to exchange out of is 2 fourplexes I own, the California duplex, whatever. Do you follow? It's the reverse.
Yep.
Same 180 days.
Can you, on a reverse exchange, I know you don't want to get too much detail here because it sounds like it's involved, but on a reverse exchange, when you've bought the property first, can you get all the same benefits as if you had sold your other property first?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
wow.
If you have no benefit right now, you're out the money. The intermediary is holding title to that 12 unit. But now you go and say, whether I want to sell 2 of my fourplexes or a 6, whatever. Add cash. You can always add cash to exchange to come up with equal to or greater than. Reverse is the same requirement. So if you bought it for 600, you got to come out of something for 600 or greater.
That's great to know. All right, I can see situations.
Well, for you,
definitely
someone
you got to move now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Here's another question came in from Harris. Can a land trust do a 1031 exchange?
No. Well, no. They're contradictory. I mean, they're competing. No. I've never seen someone use a land. There's no need to. So they would want to, from that land trust, to put it into an entity. Okay, and now that property is held, and now offer that for sale.
I guess the issue is it changes entities, doesn't it? Otherwise, you can.
Yep.
All right. So Harris, I guess the answer to that's no on that one.
Right.
Let's see. Here's one from Terrell. Said, I was wondering about investing in countries outside of the U.S., especially Thailand, Philippines, Colombia, and Brazil. So I guess we touched upon this toward the end of my interview. So
Right.
I guess restate that again. Could someone benefit from a 1031 exchange if they're buying properties, outside the U.S.?
Not if the property they're selling is inside the U.S. No. Okay? It's not considered like kind. So the answer is no. You can never exchange from a U.S. property into a foreign property, with a few exceptions, Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, what have you. Okay? What she's thinking of doing, Brazil, Thailand, whatever, is I'm saying to her, you pay $200,000 for a condominium in Thailand, and you sell it years later for $400,000. What she does is between her and God, but the IRS would love to know about it, as you know, and tax her on it. Okay? She could do an exchange between that Thailand property she sells and the Thailand property she exchanges into. And sometimes it can even be more liberal than that. It may be a Thailand property into a Vietnam property. I don't know. Brazil to Argentina. Okay, that would need some clarification. But no, she cannot take a U.S. property and exchange into a foreign property.
But to be clear, she could take a foreign property and exchange another foreign property of a different country.
Correct. And she might be hoovered to do so if she feels Uncle Sam's going to know about it and want his taxes.
Interesting.
Yep.
Like kind.
Yes.
Like kind has some geographical implications as well.
Yes. Yeah. Very good way of putting it. Yes. Originally in 1921, it's amazing. They didn't have like kind. So you could swap a boat for a condo or whatever. They killed that one quickly. A couple of years later, they amended it right away.
All right. So, Tom, this has been excellent. So, again, give them their email, how they can get a hold of you, and again, restate when would be the best time to bring you in on a transaction.
I would say when you're thinking of giving up, relinquishing a property to improve your situation. Okay, whether it be just to avoid paying taxes or maybe muscle up, duplex to a fourplex, whatever. When you're thinking of putting it up for sale, not once you have it listed, maybe you have offers coming in, before. Lay out a strategy. Once you have the strategy, you know which way you want to move.
Perfect.
So before you even list it, or if you're a FSBO, you put that sign in the yard or run that ad. Call me before or email me. And I'll give you, you want my email one more time?
Please, absolutely.
Okay. TOM, P like Peter, H like Helen, E like Howard, E like elephant, L like Leo, A like apple, N like Nelly, Y like yellow.
At yahoo.com.
I'm sorry.
All right.
Yeah, at yahoo.com. And I normally get back to people within 24 hours.
Well, this has been excellent, Tom. And again, everyone, I'm going to put this on the show notes at greenlightreinvesting.com. There'll be the archive. We have a recording of this. You're going to listen to this probably multiple times. We've covered a lot of territory, a lot of stuff I wasn't even aware of on 1031 exchanges. We're obviously talking to the gentleman who you want to be talking to when you're getting ready to do a 1031 exchange, or you're considering doing a 1031 exchange. Tom is your go-to man. He knows his stuff, and he's going to make sure that you navigate this properly and get maximum value of a 1031 exchange. And the other point I want everyone to carry away is this point that Tom was bringing home that I'm in, brother, was about the use of rental properties and 1031 exchanges as an alternative to the IRA and 401k strategy. And Tom's gonna be fired up. I'm gonna come out. We're gonna do it together. We're gonna come out with this side-by-side comparison because I know what the math's gonna show. It's gonna blow it away. The 1031 exchange strategy will blow away.
I'm excited about that.
It's gonna shake your socks. So. Tom, thank you so much for your wisdom and sharing today. Is there any any final Tomisms or any final Tom wisdom you want to convey before we wind down here today?
I guess one, in all of my years of dealing in real estate, dealing with realtors and dealing with investors such as yourself, I have found some of the most comfortable, confident people I've met as they reach retirement age, and that could be 50 on up. A large part of their wealth and retirement income is real estate.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So you got to know these tax strategies.
And one of your biggest expenses are the taxes. So
that's right.
Everything here is critical. All right, Tom. Again, this has been excellent, and thank you so much. We're probably going to have you back again. I know there's going to be a lot of follow-up. We're going to have to invite you back. This has been great. This has been great. So everyone, we're going to wind down here to Lance Edwards. This episode of Greenlight REI. I want you to go to the archive page with all the show notes for this recording, this interview, and others. Get a lot of free stuff there. Check out the show notes, greenlightreinvesting.com, and that's where you're going to learn from the experts about how to live a successful real estate lifestyle. So next time, everyone, take care and make your lifestyle a successful real estate one. Bye, everyone.